I had dismantled empires and silenced my worst enemies without a single ounce of regret, but seeing just one tear fall from his beautiful eyes was enough to bring me to my knees. If you are ready for a thrilling, heart-pounding romance where the ruthless dark underworld meets pure, untouched innocence, then make sure to smash that subscribe button, leave a like, and tell me your thoughts in the comments below. Your support helps us bring more of these amazing stories to life. Now let's dive right into the story. Part 1. The Shadow and the Light. The city of Viridia was a beast that never slept, a sprawling metropolis breathing smog and exhaling corruption. At the very top of this dangerous food chain sat Lorenzo Thorne. At 32 years old, Lorenzo was a man carved from cold marble and dipped in ice. He was the undisputed head of the Thorne Syndicate, a mafia organization so deeply rooted in the city's foundations that even the police chief and the mayor answered to him. Lorenzo was feared by all. His mere presence in a room could drop the temperature by 10 degrees. He had no attachments, no weaknesses, and absolutely no mercy. Love was a liability in his world, a foolish sentiment that got men killed. Or so he thought. Far away from the glittering, blood-stained penthouses of Lorenzo's world, in the quiet, rain-slicked streets of the lower district, lived 23-year-old Noah Hayes. Noah was the human equivalent of a warm ray of sunshine on a freezing winter morning. He was a struggling art student who worked 2 jobs just to keep a roof over his head and pay for his sick grandmother's medical bills. His main job was managing the night shifts at the Velvet Bean, a small, cozy coffee shop tucked away in a forgotten corner of the city. Noah was inherently good, possessing a pure heart that refused to see the darkness in the world. He greeted everyone with a radiant smile, completely oblivious to the dangerous shadows lurking just a few streets over. It was a Tuesday night, and a torrential downpour was aggressively hammering against the windows of the coffee shop. The streets were completely deserted. Noah was wiping down the espresso machine, softly humming a melody to himself, ready to flip the open sign to closed. Suddenly, the heavy wooden door of the cafe was kicked open, the bell above it ringing violently. Noah jumped, dropping his cloth. Standing in the doorway was a towering figure cloaked in the shadows of the storm. It was Lorenzo. His expensive, custom-tailored black suit was completely drenched, sticking to his broad, muscular frame. But what made Noah's breath hitch was the dark, crimson stain spreading rapidly across Lorenzo's white dress shirt, just below his ribs. Lorenzo had been ambushed after a high-stakes meeting. He had dispatched the assassins with brutal efficiency, but not before taking a grazed bullet to the side. Seeking a temporary refuge to call his men, he had stumbled into the only place with its lights still on. Lorenzo stepped inside, locking the door behind him with a heavy click. His piercing, icy blue eyes locked onto Noah. Those eyes were usually filled with violent authority, commanding immediate submission from anyone who dared to look. But as Lorenzo looked at the boy behind the counter, something strange happened. Noah didn't scream. He didn't run. His wide, doe-like hazel eyes were filled with shock, yes, but mostly with overwhelming, unfiltered concern. "We were closed," Noah stammered, his voice trembling slightly, not from the intimidating aura of the man, but from the sight of the blood. "But, oh my God, you're bleeding. You're hurt." Lorenzo leaned heavily against a wooden table, his hand pressing against his side. He expected the boy to call the cops. He expected fear, disgust, or panic. Instead, Noah rushed out from behind the counter, his soft, oversized beige sweater practically swallowing his slender frame. "Don't come closer, kid," Lorenzo growled, his voice a deep, gravelly baritone that vibrated through the quiet cafe. It was a warning that would make hardened criminals freeze in terror. But Noah completely ignored it. "You're losing too much blood," Noah said, his natural instinct to help completely overriding his sense of self-preservation. "Sit down. Right now. I have a first aid kit in the back." Lorenzo was too stunned by the sheer audacity and innocence of the boy to argue. He slowly lowered his large frame into a chair, his cold eyes tracking Noah's every movement. The boy returned seconds later with a white box. Noah pulled up a chair next to Lorenzo, his delicate, warm hands gently reaching out. "I have to open your shirt," Noah whispered, biting his plush bottom lip nervously. "May I?" Lorenzo simply nodded, mesmerized. As Noah's soft fingers brushed against Lorenzo's cold, heavily tattooed skin, a strange electric jolt shot straight through the Mafia boss's chest. It was a feeling entirely foreign to him. Noah's face was mere inches away, his brows furrowed in deep concentration. Lorenzo could smell the boy, a mix of vanilla, roasted coffee beans, and something intoxicatingly sweet that belonged entirely to Noah. As Noah carefully cleaned the wound and applied a tight bandage, Lorenzo observed him. He noticed the long, dark eyelashes casting shadows on the boy's flushed cheeks. He noticed the gentle rhythm of Noah's breathing. For the first time in his chaotic, blood-soaked life, Lorenzo felt peace. He felt a sudden, terrifying urge to grab this fragile boy, hide him from the cruel world, and completely destroy anyone who dared to look at him twice. There, Noah breathed out a sigh of relief, securing the bandage. It's not too deep, but you really need to see a real doctor. I just stopped the bleeding. Noah looked up, and their eyes met. Hazel warmth crashed against icy blue depth. Time seemed to completely stop in the dimly lit cafe. Noah felt his heart skip a violent beat, his cheeks burning red under the intense, predatory, yet strangely soft gaze of the mysterious man. Lorenzo slowly stood up, towering over the smaller boy. He reached into his dry inner pocket, pulled out a thick stack of $100 bills, and placed it on the table. It was more money than Noah made in 6 months. "I can't take that," Noah gasped, his eyes widening. "I just helped you. It's basic human decency." "Keep it," Lorenzo ordered, his voice softer this time, almost a caress. He leaned in slightly, his lips hovering dangerously close to Noah's ear. "And forget you ever saw me, little bird. For your own safety." Without another word, Lorenzo turned and walked out into the stormy night, blending back into the darkness. Noah stood frozen, his heart pounding a frantic rhythm against his ribcage. He looked at the massive stack of money, then at the door. He didn't know who that man was, but he knew one thing for certain. His terrifying, beautiful eyes were going to haunt his dreams tonight. Over the next 2 weeks, everything changed for Lorenzo Thorne. The ruthless king of the underworld found himself completely distracted. During deadly interrogations, his mind would wander to the smell of vanilla and coffee. During high-stakes weapon trades, all he could see were those innocent hazel eyes full of worry. He had ordered his top hacker to find out everything about the boy. Noah Hayes, 23. No criminal record. Drowning in debt. Pure. Untouched. Lorenzo didn't just want Noah. He became utterly obsessed with him. He started parking his heavily tinted, bulletproof SUV across the street from the Velvet Bean every night, hiding in the shadows, just watching his little bird work. He watched Noah smile at customers, feeling a dark, possessive rage whenever a man lingered too long at the counter. Lorenzo knew he should stay away. He knew his world would corrupt Noah's light. But the Mafia boss was a selfish man, and he had decided Noah belonged to him now. It was a Friday night. Noah was throwing the trash bags into the dark alley behind the cafe. He was exhausted, rubbing his tired eyes. Suddenly, 3 large, intimidating men blocked the exit of the alley. They weren't regular customers. They were local street thugs who had been terrorizing the neighborhood shops for protection money. "Well, well, well," the leader, a scarred man with an ugly smirk, sneered. "The pretty barista. Your boss hasn't paid his protection fee this month, kid. Since he's not here, maybe you can pay us, in other ways." Noah's blood ran cold. He backed up against the brick wall, his breath hitching in genuine terror as the men slowly advanced, pulling out a switchblade. Please, leave me alone." "I don't have any money," Noah pleaded, his voice cracking. The thug laughed, reaching out a dirty hand to grab Noah's sweater. "Oh, we don't want your money, pretty boy." Before the thug's fingers could even brush against Noah's fabric, a horrifying, sickening crack echoed through the alley. The leader screamed in agony, falling to his knees as his arm was brutally snapped in half. The other 2 thugs froze in absolute terror. Stepping out from the deep shadows of the alley, looking like the literal god of death, was Lorenzo Thorne. His icy blue eyes were entirely devoid of humanity, filled with a murderous, terrifying rage. He casually wiped a drop of the thug's blood off his expensive leather gloves. "No one," Lorenzo's voice boomed, cold and lethal, "touches what is mine." End of Part 1. Part 2, The Gilded Cage. The heavy, suffocating silence of the alleyway was broken only by the frantic, ragged breaths of the 2 remaining thugs. They stood absolutely paralyzed, their eyes wide with a primal, instinctual terror as they stared at Lorenzo Thorne. The Mafia boss didn't need to brandish a weapon. His very existence in that dimly lit, rain-soaked alley was a weapon in itself. He radiated a dark, lethal energy that promised nothing but absolute destruction. "I said," Lorenzo repeated, his voice dropping to a lethally quiet register that vibrated through the damp air. "No one touches what is mine." The leader of the thugs, still writhing on the filthy asphalt and clutching his unnaturally bent arm, let out a pathetic, gargling sob. His 2 companions finally snapped out of their shock. They looked at Lorenzo's immaculate black suit, his blood-stained leather glove, and the sheer, unadulterated murder in his icy blue eyes. Without a single word, the 2 uninjured men turned and sprinted blindly into the darkness of the city, their footsteps splashing frantically in the puddles as they completely abandoned their crying leader. Lorenzo didn't even spare them a second glance. Chasing street rats was beneath him. He slowly pulled a pristine white handkerchief from his breast pocket, wiped the drop of blood off his leather glove with terrifying, methodical calmness, and let the cloth fall onto the crying thug's chest. "Crawl away," Lorenzo ordered, his tone utterly devoid of human emotion. "If I ever hear of you or your pathetic crew stepping foot in this district again, I will make sure you are never found. Do you understand me?" The thug nodded frantically, tears and rain mixing on his bruised face, before scrambling to his feet and stumbling away into the night, leaving a trail of blood and pathetic whimpers behind him. Suddenly, the alley was deafeningly quiet again. The only sound was the heavy rain hitting the metal dumpsters. Noah was still frozen against the cold brick wall. His oversized beige sweater was damp, clinging to his slender shoulders, and his wide, hazel eyes were locked onto the imposing figure of his savior. His heart was hammering against his ribs like a desperate, trapped bird. He watched as Lorenzo slowly turned around. The terrifying, murderous mask on the Mafia boss's face instantly melted away the second his eyes landed on the trembling 23-year-old boy. The icy blue depths softened, replaced by a raw, burning intensity that made Noah's breath catch in his throat. Lorenzo took a slow step forward, peeling off his leather gloves and tossing them aside. He didn't want the rough material, or the blood on them, anywhere near Noah. He stopped just inches away from the smaller boy, towering over him, caging him in with his massive frame. "Did they hurt you, little bird?" Lorenzo asked. His voice was no longer a lethal weapon. It was a deep, rumbling hum, strangely gentle and fiercely protective. Noah could only shake his head, his vocal cords completely paralyzed by the sheer proximity of the man. The intoxicating scent of Lorenzo, expensive cedarwood cologne, petrichor, and a hint of dark danger, completely overwhelmed Noah's senses. Lorenzo slowly raised his large, warm hand, his fingers hesitating for a fraction of a second before gently brushing a wet strand of brown hair away from Noah's pale forehead. The contrast was staggering. These were hands that commanded empires and ordered executions, yet they touched Noah as if he were made of the most fragile, priceless spun glass. "Why you came back?" Noah finally managed to whisper, his voice trembling. He looked up, his hazel eyes searching Lorenzo's face. "I never left," Lorenzo replied smoothly, his thumb tracing the soft line of Noah's jawline. The physical contact sent a jolt of electricity straight through Noah's spine. "I told you to forget me, Noah. But it seems I couldn't follow my own advice." Noah's eyes widened in shock. "How? How do you know my name?" Lorenzo offered a small, mysterious smirk that made him look devastatingly handsome. "I know everything about you, Noah Hayes. I know you are 23. I know you are an art student. I know you work 2 jobs until your hands bleed just to pay for your grandmother's medical care. And I know that this city is far too dark and dangerous for someone as bright as you." A wave of panic washed over Noah. This man had investigated him. He knew his deepest secrets, his struggles, his vulnerabilities. Noah took a small step back, his back pressing firmly against the wet bricks. "Who are you? Are you a cop? Or—" "I am the farthest thing from a cop, little bird," Lorenzo said softly, dropping his hand but not stepping away. "My name is Lorenzo Thorne, and from this night forward, you are under my protection. No one in Viridia will ever look at you the wrong way again." Before Noah could process the gravity of that statement, Lorenzo gently grabbed Noah's wrist. His grip was firm but careful, leaving absolutely no room for argument. "Come. You are freezing. I am taking you home." Noah wanted to protest. He wanted to pull his arm away and run back into the safety of the coffee shop. Every rational thought in his brain screamed that Lorenzo Thorne was a dangerous, bad man. But there was something in Lorenzo's eyes, a fierce, unwavering dedication, that made Noah's legs follow him willingly. Lorenzo led him out of the alley and onto the main street. Waiting by the curb, completely indifferent to the no parking signs, was a massive pitch-black, armored SUV. A man in a tailored suit instantly stepped out from the driver's seat, holding a large black umbrella, and opened the rear door for them. Lorenzo practically lifted Noah into the lavish, leather-scented interior of the vehicle before sliding in next to him. The door shut with a heavy, airtight thud, instantly cutting off the noise of the rain and the city. It was a completely different world inside the car. It was warm, silent, and smelled of wealth and power. "Drive," Lorenzo commanded the driver. "Where to, boss?" the driver asked respectfully, his eyes locked forward, never glancing in the rearview mirror. Noah nervously rattled off his address, a worn-down apartment complex in the poorest district of Viridia. Lorenzo's jaw tightened visibly at the mention of the street name, but he didn't say a word. The ride was suffocatingly tense. Noah sat stiffly, his hands clutched tightly in his lap, acutely aware of the massive man sitting next to him. Lorenzo didn't look out the window. His gaze remained entirely fixated on Noah, watching the way the city lights flickered across the boy's beautiful, anxious face. Lorenzo felt an overwhelming, possessive urge to wrap Noah in a blanket and hide him away in his penthouse, far from the filth of the lower district. When the SUV finally pulled up to Noah's apartment building, the contrast was painfully obvious. The building was decaying, with flickering hallway lights, peeling paint, and graffiti covering the entrance. It was no place for a delicate creature like Noah. "Thank you for the ride, Mr. Thorne," Noah said quickly, reaching for the door handle. "And thank you for back there. I can take it from here." "I am walking you up," Lorenzo stated, his tone leaving absolutely zero room for negotiation. "No, really, it's fine. My apartment is a mess, and—" Lorenzo was already out of the car. He opened Noah's door and offered his hand. Reluctantly, feeling his cheeks burn with embarrassment, Noah took it. They walked up 3 flights of dimly lit, foul-smelling stairs. Lorenzo's presence felt entirely alien in this environment. When Noah unlocked his thin, fragile wooden door and pushed it open, he wanted the floor to swallow him whole. The apartment was tiny. It consisted of a single room that served as a bedroom, kitchen, and living space. It was impeccably clean, thanks to Noah, but the poverty was impossible to hide. The wallpaper was peeling, the heating pipes clanked noisily, and on the small dining table sat a massive, intimidating mountain of past-due bills and final eviction notices. Lorenzo stepped inside, his broad shoulders practically filling the narrow entryway. His piercing eyes swept the room, taking in every single detail. He walked straight past a frozen Noah and stopped at the small dining table. He picked up one of the red-stamped envelopes. "Medical bills for a private care facility," Lorenzo read aloud, his voice low and dark. He picked up another paper. "A final eviction notice. You are 3 months behind on rent, Noah." Noah felt hot tears prick his eyes. It was humiliating. "Please put those down," Noah whispered, his voice cracking. "I am managing. I just picked up a 3rd shift at the bakery. I'll figure it out." Lorenzo dropped the papers onto the table and turned around. In 3 large strides, he closed the distance between them, trapping Noah against the front door. Lorenzo looked down at the boy, his expression a mixture of profound anger and deep, aching tenderness. "You are drowning, Noah," Lorenzo said, his hands coming up to cup Noah's face, his thumbs wiping away a stray tear that had escaped the boy's eye. "You are working yourself to death, living in a shoebox that isn't even safe. Those thugs tonight were just the beginning. The world is cruel, and it will tear someone as pure as you apart." "I don't need your pity," Noah choked out, trying to look away from those hypnotic blue eyes, but Lorenzo held him firm. "This isn't pity. This is an acquisition," Lorenzo whispered fiercely, leaning down until their foreheads were practically touching. "I am paying off your grandmother's medical facility for the next 10 years. I am clearing your debts. You are quitting those pathetic jobs." Noah's eyes went wide with shock and disbelief. You can't do that. I can't accept that. Why would you do that for me?" "Because you belong to me now," Lorenzo growled softly, a possessive darkness swirling in his eyes. "And in return, you are packing your bags tonight. You are leaving this decaying rat trap, and you are coming to live with me." Noah's breath completely left his lungs. Moving in with a Mafia boss? It was madness. It was dangerous. "No," Noah breathed out, shaking his head. "I don't know you. You kill people. You're a criminal. I can't just—" Crash. Before Noah could finish his sentence, the single window in the apartment shattered violently, raining sharp glass across the floor. Lorenzo's reflexes were inhuman. In a split second, before the sound of the gunshot even fully registered, Lorenzo tackled Noah to the ground, covering the boy's slender body entirely with his own massive, heavily muscled frame. Noah screamed in terror as a second bullet hit the plaster wall exactly where his head had been a second ago. He was pinned beneath Lorenzo, the heavy weight of the Mafia boss pressing him into the cheap carpet. Lorenzo pulled a sleek, silver handgun from his shoulder holster with lightning speed, his eyes blazing with a terrifying, homicidal fury as he aimed at the broken window. He pressed Noah's head firmly into his chest, shielding him completely. "Listen to me very carefully, little bird," Lorenzo whispered against Noah's ear, his voice deadly calm despite the chaos. The smell of gunpowder filled the small room. "My enemies have found me, and now they have seen you. You are in my world now." Lorenzo looked down, his eyes locking onto Noah's terrified, tear-filled gaze. "And I will burn this entire city to the ground before I let anyone take you from me. We are leaving. Now." End of Part 2. Part 3. the Obsidian Fortress. The deafening echo of the gunshot was still ringing in Noah's ears, a sharp, violent sound that shattered the quiet reality he had known just seconds ago. He was pinned to the cheap, threadbare carpet of his tiny apartment, his face pressed against Lorenzo's solid, heavily muscled chest. The metallic, bitter scent of gunpowder rapidly filled the small room, mixing with the smell of old rain and cheap plaster. Above him, Lorenzo was a statue of lethal focus. The Mafia boss didn't flinch. He didn't hesitate. With his left arm firmly wrapped around Noah's trembling waist, effectively shielding the boy entirely with his own massive body, Lorenzo raised his sleek silver handgun. His icy blue eyes were narrowed into predatory slits, tracking the darkness outside the shattered window. 2 more shots rang out from the street below, the bullets tearing blindly through the ceiling. Noah squeezed his eyes shut, a muffled sob escaping his lips. He clamped his hands tightly onto the lapels of Lorenzo's expensive suit, holding on as if Lorenzo was the only anchor keeping him from spinning off the edge of the earth. "Stay down, little bird. Do not move a single muscle," Lorenzo commanded, his voice a low, gravelly rumble that vibrated against Noah's cheek. Before Noah could even process the instruction, the heavy wooden door of his apartment was kicked completely off its hinges. Noah flinched violently, anticipating another attack, but it was the driver from the SUV, his gun drawn, followed by 2 other massive men in dark suits. "Boss," the driver, Matteo, shouted, his eyes scanning the room with terrifying efficiency. "Shooter is on the opposite rooftop. West side. Sniper rifle. Our ground team is already flanking the building." "They missed," Lorenzo growled, his voice radiating a murderous, chilling aura that made the temperature in the room drop to absolute zero. He slowly lowered his weapon, but kept his body firmly draped over Noah. "They aimed for the apartment, not for me. They were trying to send a message. They know who he is." Noah's heart completely stopped. They know who he is. The rival gang, the assassins, the monsters of Viridia, they knew about the barista from the corner coffee shop. Because Lorenzo had visited him. Because Lorenzo had claimed him in the alleyway. "Secure the perimeter." "We are moving him right now," Lorenzo ordered. He finally shifted his weight, sitting up and pulling Noah with him. Noah's legs felt like absolute jelly. He couldn't stand. The adrenaline crash was hitting him hard, making his vision blur and his lungs struggle for oxygen. He was hyperventilating, his delicate fingers trembling uncontrollably as he stared at the bullet holes in his wall. Without a single word of complaint or impatience, Lorenzo holstered his weapon and simply scooped Noah up into his arms. He lifted the 23-year-old boy as effortlessly as if he were carrying a porcelain doll. "I've got you," Lorenzo whispered fiercely, pressing Noah's face into the crook of his neck. "Don't look at the window. Just look at me. Close your eyes, Noah." Noah buried his face into the warm, cedar-scented skin of Lorenzo's neck, surrendering completely to the terrifyingly powerful man carrying him. Surrounded by a phalanx of heavily armed guards, Lorenzo carried Noah out of the ruined apartment, down the dark, foul-smelling stairwell, and out into the torrential rain. The street was utter chaos. 2 more armored black SUVs had arrived, completely blocking off the road. Men in suits were scanning the rooftops with flashlights and weapons drawn. It was a literal war zone in the middle of the lower district. Lorenzo shielded Noah from the rain with his broad body, practically throwing them both into the back of the primary SUV before slamming the heavy, bulletproof door shut. The vehicle immediately peeled away from the curb, its massive tires screeching against the wet asphalt as it sped off into the night, flanked by the rest of the convoy. Inside the quiet, leather-scented cabin of the car, the silence was agonizing. Noah was curled up in the corner of the plush seat, his knees pulled up to his chest, violently shaking. The reality of his situation was crashing down on him. He had lost his apartment. He was being hunted by assassins. His quiet, struggling, but safe life was entirely gone. Lorenzo watched him, his icy blue eyes completely devoid of the murderous rage from seconds ago. Now they were filled with a dark, suffocating guilt and an overwhelming, possessive need to protect. Lorenzo slid across the leather seat, closing the distance between them. He gently reached out, his large hands carefully wrapping around Noah's trembling wrists. He pulled Noah's hands away from his face. "Breathe, little bird," Lorenzo said softly, his thumbs drawing soothing circles on Noah's pale skin. "In and out. You are safe now. No one will ever touch you in this car. The glass is reinforced, the steel is armored. You are untouched." My grandmother's photos," Noah choked out, tears finally spilling over his thick eyelashes and rolling down his flushed cheeks. "My sketchbook, my clothes. Everything is back there." Lorenzo's jaw tightened. "I will buy you 1,000 sketchbooks. I will have every piece of clothing in Viridia brought to your feet. I will send my best men to retrieve your grandmother's photos tonight. But you are never, ever stepping foot in that district again. Noah looked up, his hazel eyes wide and fearful. Where are you taking me? You can't just kidnap me. I have a life. I have a job at the coffee shop tomorrow. You don't have a job anymore, Noah, Lorenzo stated firmly, though his grip remained impossibly gentle. The men who shot at your window are the Viper Syndicate. They are my oldest, most ruthless enemies. They have watchers everywhere. They saw me walk into that alleyway tonight. They saw me touch you. In their eyes, you are my weakness. If you go back to the coffee shop tomorrow, you will be dead before noon. The blunt, brutal honesty of Lorenzo's words hit Noah like a physical blow. The air rushed out of his lungs. He was trapped. So what happens to me? Noah whispered, his voice broken and incredibly small. Lorenzo reached up, his large hand gently cupping the side of Noah's face, wiping away a fresh tear with his thumb. You come home with me. You live in my house. You eat at my table. You stay where I can see you, where my guards can protect you. You become untouchable, Noah. Because from this moment forward, you belong to the Thorn Syndicate. You belong to me. Noah didn't have the strength to fight the possessive claim. The exhaustion, the terror, and the strange, intoxicating warmth of Lorenzo's touch were overwhelming his senses. He slowly leaned his head into Lorenzo's large palm, closing his eyes as the armored convoy sped out of the slums and towards the wealthiest, most heavily guarded district of the city. An hour later, the massive iron gates of the Thorn estate slowly swung open. Noah opened his tired eyes, gasping softly at the sight. It wasn't just a house. It was an impenetrable fortress hidden in the wealthy hills of Viridia. Surrounded by 20-foot-high stone walls, security cameras, and armed patrols, stood a sprawling, magnificent mansion built of dark stone and floor-to-ceiling reinforced glass. It looked like a modern castle, beautiful but fiercely intimidating. The SUV pulled up to the grand entrance. Matteo opened the door, and Lorenzo stepped out first, immediately turning to offer his hand to Noah. Noah hesitated. Stepping out of the car meant officially stepping into the underworld. But he had no choice. He placed his small, cold hand into Lorenzo's massive, warm palm and let the Mafia boss pull him out. The interior of the mansion was breathtaking. It smelled of expensive wood, fresh lilies, and wealth. The floors were black marble, and a massive chandelier hung from the vaulted ceiling. But Noah felt incredibly out of place. He was standing in the middle of this billionaire's palace, wearing cheap, rain-soaked sneakers and a ragged, oversized sweater. Lorenzo didn't care about the wet shoes on his immaculate marble floor. He immediately noticed something else. Under the bright lights of the foyer, Lorenzo saw a tiny, thin red line on Noah's pale cheek, a small scratch from the shattered glass of the apartment window. Lorenzo's eyes darkened instantly. The monster inside him, the ruthless boss who demanded perfection and absolute control, flared violently at the sight of a blemish on his beautiful, innocent boy. Matteo, Lorenzo barked, his voice echoing loudly through the massive hall, making Noah jump. Fetch the medical kit. Bring it to my private quarters. Now. It's just a scratch, Noah protested weakly, raising his fingers to his cheek. I didn't even feel it. You don't need to. Do not speak, Lorenzo interrupted, though his tone wasn't angry at Noah, but rather furious at himself for letting his treasure get hurt. Without waiting for another word, Lorenzo picked Noah up in his arms again, completely ignoring the boy's flustered protests. He carried him up a massive, sweeping staircase, past priceless paintings and heavily armed guards who immediately averted their eyes in absolute respect. Lorenzo carried Noah down a long, quiet corridor and kicked open a heavy oak door at the very end. They entered the master suite. It was the size of Noah's entire apartment building, decorated in dark grays, rich blacks, and deep ocean blues. In the center of the room sat a massive, king-sized bed covered in dark silk sheets. Lorenzo gently set Noah down on the edge of the mattress. The mattress was so soft it felt like sitting on a cloud. Lorenzo knelt on the plush carpet right in front of him, bringing himself down to Noah's eye level. Matteo appeared silently in the doorway, handing Lorenzo a sleek black medical box before bowing his head and disappearing, closing the heavy door behind him. They were completely alone. Lorenzo opened the box, his large, tattooed hands moving with surprising delicacy. He pulled out an antiseptic wipe. Look at me, he commanded softly. Noah raised his head, his hazel eyes locking onto the intense, magnetic blue of Lorenzo's gaze. As Lorenzo carefully dabbed the tiny scratch on Noah's cheek, the extreme proximity made the air in the room feel thick and heavy. Noah could feel the heat radiating from Lorenzo's broad chest. He could see the faint, dangerous pulse beating in the Mafia boss's throat. I failed to protect you tonight, Lorenzo whispered, his voice laced with genuine self-hatred. It was a terrifying confession from a man who considered himself untouchable. That will never happen again. Do you understand me, little bird? You are safe here, but you must never run from me. Noah swallowed hard, his heart doing a frantic, fluttering dance in his chest. He was a prisoner in a gilded cage. But looking into Lorenzo's eyes, seeing the raw, unhinged devotion burning there, Noah realized something terrifying. He didn't want to run. I understand, Noah breathed out softly, his voice barely a whisper in the massive room. Lorenzo's gaze dropped to Noah's plush, trembling lips for a fraction of a second, his pupils dilating heavily in the dim light. The tension between them was electric, highly combustible, and deeply dangerous. Lorenzo slowly leaned in, the scent of cedarwood wrapping around Noah entirely, sealing his fate in the dark, beautiful world of the Thorn Syndicate. End of Part 3. Part 4. The Velvet Chains. The silence in the master suite was absolutely deafening, heavy with a tension so thick it felt like a physical weight pressing against Noah's chest. Lorenzo was still kneeling on the plush carpet before him, their faces mere inches apart. The Mafia boss's icy blue eyes had darkened to the color of a stormy ocean, his gaze completely fixed on Noah's trembling, parted lips. For a fleeting, heart-stopping second, Noah thought Lorenzo was going to kiss him. He could feel the phantom heat of the man's breath against his skin, smelling the intoxicating blend of cedarwood, expensive mint, and pure, unfiltered danger. Noah's fingers instinctively curled into the dark silk bedsheets beneath him. He didn't pull away. He was terrified of the man, terrified of the guns and the blood and the shattered glass, but the primal gravitational pull Lorenzo exerted over him was undeniable. But Lorenzo was a master of control. He had built an empire on patience and precision. He could see the exhaustion bruising the skin under Noah's beautiful hazel eyes. He could feel the slight tremor still racking the boy's delicate frame. Lorenzo knew that if he pushed now, if he claimed what he so desperately wanted, he would only frighten his little bird away. With a supreme, agonizing effort that made a muscle tick furiously in his sharp jawline, Lorenzo slowly pulled back. He dropped his hand from Noah's face, though the loss of contact instantly made the room feel 10 degrees colder. You need to sleep, Lorenzo said, his voice a low, gravelly rasp that betrayed the intense effort it took to restrain himself. He stood up to his full, towering height, suddenly looking every bit the untouchable king of the underworld once more. The bathroom is through those double doors. There are fresh towels and a robe. No one will enter this room. You have my absolute word, Noah. Noah swallowed the nervous lump in his throat, looking up at the giant of a man. Where are you going to sleep? A dark, incredibly handsome smirk tugged at the corner of Lorenzo's mouth. I don't sleep, little bird. Not when my enemies are bold enough to shoot at what belongs to me. I have a syndicate to run and a message to send. Lorenzo turned towards the heavy oak door, but paused, looking over his broad shoulder. Lock the door from the inside if it makes you feel safer. But know that my men are stationed at every exit. You are the safest person in Viridia tonight. With a soft click of the door, Lorenzo was gone. Noah was left entirely alone in the cavernous, luxurious suite. He let out a shaky breath he hadn't realized he was holding. His legs still felt like jelly as he forced himself to stand. He walked into the ensuite bathroom, which was entirely constructed of dark gray marble and featured a massive, sunken rain shower. It was bigger than his entire old apartment. After a long, hot shower that finally washed the smell of gunpowder and old rain off his skin, Noah slipped into the black silk robe Lorenzo had mentioned. It was clearly Lorenzo's. It swallowed Noah completely, the hem dragging on the floor and the sleeves hanging far past his fingertips. But as Noah wrapped it tightly around his slender waist, he couldn't deny the comforting, overwhelming scent of cedarwood that clung to the fabric. It made him feel strangely protected. He climbed into the massive, ridiculous bed, pulling the dark, heavy duvet up to his chin. He expected to lie awake all night, paralyzed by fear and the trauma of the shooting. But the mattress was too soft, the room was too quiet, and the lingering scent of his dangerous savior was too soothing. Within minutes, Noah's exhaustion dragged him into a deep, dreamless sleep. When Noah finally opened his eyes, golden morning sunlight was streaming through the floor-to-ceiling windows, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air. For a panicked, disorienting second, he didn't know where he was. Then, the memories of the alleyway, the thugs, the sniper, and Lorenzo's dark, obsessive eyes came crashing back into his mind. He sat up quickly, clutching the silk sheets to his chest. The room was empty. A soft knock echoed from the heavy oak door. Before Noah could speak, the door gently opened, and an older woman in a pristine, tailored uniform stepped inside, carrying a massive silver tray. She had kind, warm brown eyes, and a motherly smile that immediately put Noah at ease. "Good morning, Mr. Hayes," she said softly, setting the tray down on a small glass table near the balcony. "My name is Maria. I am the head housekeeper. Mr. Thorne instructed me to ensure you were completely undisturbed until you woke up naturally." Noah awkwardly pushed his messy brown hair out of his eyes, pulling the oversized robe tighter around himself. "Oh, thank you, Maria. Please, just call me Noah." Maria smiled warmly. "As you wish, Noah. I have brought you breakfast. Freshly baked croissants, imported fruit, and the specific espresso blend you prefer. Mr. Thorne had it sourced this morning." Noah's eyes widened in shock. Lorenzo had remembered the exact coffee beans he used at the cafe. It was a terrifying, yet deeply intimate level of attention. "Also," Maria continued, gesturing to a sleek black garment bag hanging on the closet door, "Mr. Thorne had some clothing delivered for you. He ordered his personal tailor to estimate your measurements. He deeply apologizes that it is only a temporary wardrobe until you can have a proper fitting this afternoon." Noah felt his cheeks burn with a mixture of embarrassment and overwhelming confusion. I can't accept all this. I'm just a barista. I shouldn't even be here. Is Mr. Thorne here?" Maria's smile faltered slightly, a shadow passing over her kind eyes. "The boss is handling the situation from last night. He is currently down in the lower levels. It is best we do not disturb him when he is working, Noah. But he left strict orders that you are not to lift a finger today." She paused, looking at Noah with a strange, profound reverence. "You must understand, child. I have worked for the Thorne family for 30 years. I raised Lorenzo. He has never, not once, brought anyone to this estate. You are very, very special to him." The weight of those words settled heavily on Noah's chest long after Maria left the room. He wasn't just a random act of charity. He was an obsession. Noah eventually got out of bed and opened the garment bag. Inside were soft, incredibly expensive cashmere sweaters, tailored trousers, and silk shirts, all in neutral tones that perfectly complemented his hazel eyes. He dressed in a soft cream-colored sweater and dark trousers, marveling at how perfectly they fit his slender frame. Lorenzo hadn't just guessed his size, he had studied him. Meanwhile, 3 floors below the sunlit master suite, the atmosphere was a stark, horrifying contrast. Lorenzo Thorne stood in a soundproof, concrete-lined room. He had discarded his suit jacket, his white dress shirt rolled up to his elbows, revealing the intricate, dark ink of his Mafia tattoos crawling up his muscular forearms. His icy blue eyes were entirely devoid of humanity, replaced by the gaze of a ruthless apex predator. Tied to a heavy metal chair in the center of the room was one of the snipers from the Viper Syndicate. The man was bruised, bloody, and trembling so violently the chair rattled against the concrete floor. Matteo stood silently in the corner, his face a mask of professional indifference. "I am going to ask you one final time." Lorenzo's voice was a deadly, vibrating whisper that echoed off the cold walls. He casually picked up a heavy silver wrench from a table, testing its weight in his large hand. "Who ordered the hit on the apartment? Was it meant for me, or was it meant to scare the boy?" "I swear to God, Thorne," the sniper choked out, coughing up blood. "It was just a warning. The boss wanted to show you that you aren't untouchable. We saw you with the kid. We knew he was your weak spot." The temperature in the room plummeted. Lorenzo's jaw clenched so hard his teeth audibly ground together. The very concept of Noah being used as a pawn, of Noah being terrified by these pathetic street rats, ignited a volcanic, homicidal rage inside his chest. "My weak spot," Lorenzo repeated softly, a terrifyingly dark, hollow laugh escaping his chest. He stepped closer to the trembling man, towering over him like the Grim Reaper himself. "You made a fatal miscalculation. That boy is not my weakness. He is my reason to burn your entire syndicate to the ground." Lorenzo dropped the wrench, the loud clang making the sniper flinch violently. Lorenzo turned to Matteo, his eyes blazing with an unholy fire. "Find every single warehouse, every casino, and every shipping lane the Viper Syndicate owns," Lorenzo ordered, his voice echoing with absolute, unquestionable authority. "Burn them all down. I want their empire completely eradicated by midnight. And if anyone even breathes the name Noah Hayes again, I will personally rip their tongues out. Do you understand me?" "Yes, boss," Matteo nodded deeply, immediately stepping out of the room to execute the massacre. Hours later, the sun was beginning to set over Viridia, casting long, golden shadows across the meticulously manicured gardens of the Thorne estate. Noah was sitting on a stone bench near a massive fountain, staring blankly at the water. He felt completely lost. He was living in a palace, wearing clothes that cost more than his college tuition, but he was entirely disconnected from reality. He jumped slightly as he heard the crunch of heavy footsteps on the gravel path. Lorenzo appeared from the archway of rose bushes. He was back in a perfectly tailored black suit, looking completely immaculate and impossibly handsome. There was absolutely no trace of the violence he had orchestrated just hours prior. The monster was hidden perfectly beneath the surface of the gentleman. As Lorenzo laid his eyes on Noah, sitting in the garden looking like an ethereal, delicate painting in his cashmere sweater, all the tension drained from the Mafia boss's broad shoulders. "You look beautiful, little bird," Lorenzo murmured, his deep voice carrying softly across the garden. Noah blushed furiously, his fingers nervously picking at the hem of his sweater. Thank you for the clothes. And the breakfast. But Lorenzo, I can't stay here forever. I need to work. I need to pay you back for." "Stop," Lorenzo said gently, walking over and sitting on the stone bench right next to Noah. The sheer size of him made Noah feel incredibly small, incredibly protected. "You owe me absolutely nothing. Your only job now is to exist. To be safe." Lorenzo reached into his inner jacket pocket. He pulled out a small, worn leather-bound book and a thick, familiar envelope. He gently placed them in Noah's lap. Noah gasped, his hands flying to his mouth. It was his old, battered sketchbook, the one he had left on the kitchen counter of his ruined apartment. And the envelope, it contained the Polaroid photos of his grandmother. They were completely unharmed. "My men retrieved them this morning," Lorenzo explained softly, his icy eyes watching the tears well up in Noah's eyes. "I know I cannot replace the peace of mind you lost last night, but I will do everything in my power to give you a new one." Noah couldn't stop the tears from falling. He clutched the sketchbook to his chest, utterly overwhelmed by the gesture. This terrifying, dangerous man, who had the power to order executions and destroy cities, had sent his men into a war zone just to retrieve a cheap sketchbook and a few photographs, because he knew they mattered to Noah. Overcome by a sudden surge of pure, unfiltered emotion, Noah did something completely reckless. He turned, closed the small gap between them, and threw his slender arms around Lorenzo's thick, muscular neck, burying his tear-stained face into the crook of the Mafia boss's shoulder. Lorenzo went entirely rigid. His breath hitched violently in his chest. For a man who was feared by thousands, the feeling of this fragile, innocent boy willingly seeking comfort in his arms was the most staggering, earth-shattering experience of his entire life. Slowly, almost reverently, Lorenzo wrapped his massive, powerful arms around Noah's small waist, pulling the boy tightly against his chest. He buried his face in Noah's soft brown hair, breathing in the sweet scent of vanilla and warm skin. "I've got you, Noah," Lorenzo whispered fiercely against the boy's hair, a dark, possessive vow sealing their fate. "I've got you, and I am never, ever letting you go." End of Part 4. Part 5, The Lion's Den. For a man who had spent his entire life mastering the art of absolute control, Lorenzo Thorne was currently entirely at the mercy of the slender, trembling boy in his arms. The garden of the Thorne estate was silent, bathed in the fading, bruised purple light of dusk. Noah had buried his tear-stained face into the crook of Lorenzo's neck, his small, delicate hands clutching the expensive fabric of the Mafia boss's suit jacket like a lifeline. The sheer vulnerability of the gesture sent a visceral shockwave straight through Lorenzo's chest. He closed his icy blue eyes, resting his chin gently against the crown of Noah's soft brown hair, and simply breathed him in. Vanilla, warm skin, and the faint papery scent of the old sketchbook. Lorenzo's massive hands splayed across Noah's back, pulling the boy flush against his heavily muscled torso. He could feel the frantic, rapid beating of Noah's heart, a stark contrast to his own slow, heavy pulse. In that fleeting moment, the blood on Lorenzo's hands, the burning warehouses of the Viper Syndicate, the endless war for the city of Viridia, it all ceased to exist. There was only Noah. "I am entirely yours to command, little bird," Lorenzo murmured into the quiet evening air, his voice a dark, rough vibration against Noah's skin. "Your tears are the only thing in this world I cannot fight." Noah slowly pulled back, his cheeks burning a furious, beautiful shade of crimson. He suddenly realized how incredibly bold he had been, throwing himself at the most dangerous man in the city. He looked down at his shoes, his long eyelashes casting shadows over his flushed cheeks. "I'm sorry," Noah stammered, his voice incredibly soft. "I shouldn't have. You gave me back the only things that truly matter to me." Lorenzo reached out, his long, tattooed fingers gently hooking under Noah's chin, forcing the boy to look up and meet his gaze. The raw, unfiltered adoration in Lorenzo's eyes made Noah's breath catch in his throat. "Never apologize for touching me, Noah," Lorenzo commanded, his tone perfectly balancing lethal authority with a devastating tenderness. "Never." The tension strung between them was a physical, electric thing, pulling them closer. But Lorenzo knew better than to push. He stepped back, offering his arm with the grace of a deadly, aristocratic predator. Come. The evening air is growing cold, and you have barely eaten since yesterday. We are having dinner. The dining room of the Thorne estate was a cavernous, magnificent space featuring a long mahogany table that could easily seat 30 underbosses. Tonight, it was set for exactly two. Noah sat at the right hand of the head chair, engulfed in a massive, high-backed velvet seat, while Lorenzo sat at the head, dominating the room. The meal was a lavish, multi-course Italian spread, prepared by a private chef, but Noah could barely focus on the food. He was acutely aware of Lorenzo's gaze. The Mafia boss barely touched his own plate. Instead, he watched Noah eat with a dark, satisfied intensity, as if ensuring the boy's nourishment was his sole purpose in life. Noah took a nervous sip of his sparkling water, his hazel eyes darting around the massive, quiet room. Lorenzo, I need to ask you something. About tomorrow. Lorenzo immediately set his wine glass down, giving Noah his absolute, undivided attention. Ask. It's Sunday tomorrow, Noah began, his voice hesitant. I always visit my grandmother at the Silver Pines Care Facility on Sundays. She expects me. If I don't show up, she will panic. Her heart condition can't handle stress. I have to go see her. The temperature in the dining room noticeably dropped. The soft, indulgent look in Lorenzo's eyes vanished, instantly replaced by the cold, calculating stare of the Syndicate boss. He leaned back in his chair, his broad shoulders tensing. Absolutely not, Lorenzo stated, his voice a flat, uncompromising wall of granite. Noah flinched at the harshness of the refusal, but a surprising spark of defiance flared in his chest. He set his fork down, his jaw tightening. You can't just keep me locked in this house forever. I told you she is sick. She is the only family I have left. I am going to see her. Lorenzo's eyes narrowed into dangerous slits. He was not a man who was ever defied. Men had been executed for simply questioning his tone. But looking at Noah, seeing the fierce, desperate love the boy had for his grandmother, Lorenzo felt a terrifying crack in his ironclad resolve. Noah, Lorenzo said, his voice dropping to a low, warning rumble. The Viper Syndicate is bleeding. I crippled them today, but they are like cornered rats. They are desperate, and they are hunting for you to get to me. If you step outside these gates, you become a target. I will not risk your life for a Sunday visit. Then let them try. Noah snapped, surprising even himself with the volume of his voice. He immediately slapped a hand over his mouth, his eyes widening in horror at his own outburst. He had just yelled at a Mafia boss. Instead of anger, a dark, incredibly handsome smirk slowly spread across Lorenzo's face. He found Noah's tiny display of fiery rebellion absolutely intoxicating. The little bird had talons. Lorenzo slowly stood up from the table, his towering frame casting a massive shadow. He walked over to Noah's chair, placing his large hands on the armrests, effectively trapping Noah in a cage of pure, masculine power. He leaned down until their noses were almost touching. You are infuriatingly stubborn, Lorenzo whispered, his gaze dropping briefly to Noah's plush lips. Fine. You will see your grandmother tomorrow. But you will do exactly as I say. You do not leave my sight. Not for a single second. Do you understand? Noah felt a rush of immense relief, completely ignoring the suffocating proximity. He nodded frantically. Yes. Yes, whatever you say. Thank you, Lorenzo. The next morning, Noah truly understood the terrifying magnitude of Lorenzo Thorne's power. When Noah walked out of the massive front doors of the estate, dressed in a soft, light blue cashmere sweater and dark slacks, he froze in his tracks. The circular driveway was entirely filled with heavily armed men in immaculate black suits. There were 4 armored pitch-black SUVs idling, their engines creating a low, menacing hum in the morning air. Matteo stood by the center vehicle, checking the magazine of a matte black assault rifle before sliding it effortlessly under his tailored jacket. Lorenzo stepped out behind Noah, looking like a dark god in a charcoal, 3-piece suit. He rested a heavy, warm hand on the small of Noah's back, guiding the stunned boy forward. Is all this really necessary? Noah whispered, his eyes wide as the heavily armed guards respectfully bowed their heads as they passed. If I had my way, I would bring an entire battalion, Lorenzo replied smoothly, opening the heavy door of the center SUV himself and practically lifting Noah inside. The convoy moved through the streets of Viridia like a sleek, unstoppable predator. Traffic parted for them. Stoplights were ignored. When they finally pulled up to the serene, quiet grounds of the Silver Pines Care Facility, the arrival of the Mafia fleet caused absolute panic among the nursing staff. Noah stepped out of the car, immediately feeling the oppressive weight of Lorenzo's presence right behind him. 6 massive guards instantly formed a tight perimeter around them as they walked into the lobby. The receptionist, a young girl in scrubs, looked utterly terrified, her hands shaking over her keyboard. Room 402. Evelyn Hayes, Lorenzo commanded, his voice echoing in the quiet lobby. He didn't ask, he demanded. The receptionist practically slammed the elevator button for them. When they reached the 4th floor, Noah led the way down the sterile, white hallway. He stopped in front of a small, standard room. He turned to look at Lorenzo, nervously chewing his bottom lip. Please, she doesn't know about, the danger, or who you are. She thinks I just work at the coffee shop. Lorenzo's expression softened entirely. He reached out, his thumb gently brushing over Noah's lower lip, freeing it from the boy's teeth. I am simply your benefactor, Noah. I will not frighten her. Noah took a deep breath and pushed the door open. Evelyn Hayes was a fragile, tiny woman with completely white hair and kind, tired eyes that perfectly matched Noah's. She was sitting in a wheelchair by the window, a knitted blanket over her lap. Her face instantly lit up with a radiant, beautiful smile when she saw her grandson. My sweet boy, she rasped, reaching out her frail, shaking hands. Nana. Noah rushed forward, dropping to his knees beside her chair and burying his face in her shoulder, inhaling the comforting scent of lavender and old paper. He had been so terrified he would never see her again. Lorenzo stepped into the room, seemingly filling the entire space with his sheer size. He stood quietly by the door, his hands clasped behind his back, observing the reunion. For the first time in his dark, violent life, Lorenzo felt a strange ache in his chest. He had never known this kind of pure, unconditional family love. His own father had taught him how to shoot a man before teaching him how to read. Evelyn eventually pulled back, her sharp eyes immediately locking onto the giant, terrifyingly handsome man standing in the doorway. Noah, darling, who is your very tall friend? Noah stood up, nervously wiping his eyes. Nana, this is Lorenzo. Lorenzo Thorne. He's my new boss. Lorenzo stepped forward, completely ignoring the sterile, hospital environment. He walked up to Evelyn, smoothly taking her frail hand in his massive, tattooed one, and bowed with the elegant, flawless grace of a European prince. It is an absolute honor to finally meet you, Mrs. Hayes, Lorenzo said, his voice a deep, soothing velvet that completely lacked its usual lethal edge. Noah speaks of you constantly. You have raised a truly remarkable, brilliant young man. Evelyn looked at Lorenzo, her old, wise eyes scanning his expensive suit, the expensive watch on his wrist, and finally the intense, icy blue eyes that were completely fixated on her grandson. She was old, but she was not blind. She saw the heavy, suffocatingly possessive aura rolling off the man. But strangely, she didn't see danger. She saw an absolute, unwavering shield around Noah. Mr. Thorne, Evelyn smiled a knowing, gentle smile. Thank you for looking after my boy. He works too hard. He carries the weight of the world on those narrow shoulders. He will never carry another burden as long as I draw breath. Lorenzo replied instantly, the dark vow slipping past his lips before he could stop it. It wasn't a pleasantry, it was a blood oath. Noah's heart did a violent, terrifying flip in his chest. The raw intensity in Lorenzo's voice was staggering. For the next hour, Lorenzo sat quietly in the corner of the room, watching Noah read a book to his grandmother. He watched the way the sunlight caught the golden flecks in Noah's hazel eyes. He watched the gentle curve of Noah's smile. While Noah read, Lorenzo silently texted Matteo, ordering him to instantly purchase the entire care facility and upgrade Evelyn to the most luxurious, heavily guarded penthouse suite available on the top floor. Money was nothing compared to the peace of mind of his little bird. When it was finally time to leave, Noah kissed his grandmother's forehead, promising to return. The ride back to the Thorne estate was much quieter. The adrenaline of the visit had faded, leaving Noah feeling completely drained but deeply, undeniably happy. He rested his head against the cool leather of the SUV's window, stealing secret, shy glances at Lorenzo's sharp profile. Lorenzo had been a monster in the alleyway. He had been a killer during the sniper attack. But today, in that hospital room, he had been a gentleman. He had treated Noah's fragile world with utmost respect. Noah was terrified to admit it, even to himself, but he was falling. He was falling dangerously fast into the dark, intoxicating abyss that was Lorenzo Thorne. The massive iron gates of the estate swung open, welcoming them back into the gilded cage. As they stepped out of the car and walked into the grand marble foyer, Lorenzo finally turned to Noah, the heavy, possessive tension returning in full force. He reached out, his hand sliding smoothly around the back of Noah's neck, pulling the boy into the warmth of his chest. You did exceptionally well today, little bird, Lorenzo murmured, his icy eyes darkening as his gaze dropped to Noah's lips once more. The air between them instantly ignited, heavy with unspoken desire. Lorenzo's thumb slowly traced Noah's jawline. "I think you deserve a reward." Noah's breath hitched, his eyes fluttering shut as he leaned unconsciously into the intoxicating touch. He was finally ready. He wanted Lorenzo to close the distance. But before Lorenzo could lean down, the heavy oak doors of Lorenzo's private study burst violently open. Matteo strode into the foyer, his face completely pale, his professional mask entirely shattered. He was holding a blood-stained, sealed black envelope. Lorenzo's head snapped up, his murderous, lethal aura returning in a violent explosion that made Noah flinch. The beautiful, romantic moment was instantly shattered. "Boss," Matteo breathed heavily, refusing to look at Noah. "We have a massive problem. It's not the Vipers. We found 3 of our men dead at the docks. And they left this." Matteo extended the black envelope. Written in harsh, jagged silver ink across the front was a single, horrifying sentence. "We know the little bird's name. We're coming to clip his wings." End of Part 5. Part 6, The Blood Vow. The beautiful, fragile bubble of warmth that had surrounded Noah just seconds ago shattered into a million irreparable pieces. The silence in the grand marble foyer of the Thorne estate was suddenly deafening. The air, which had been thick with unspoken desire and the intoxicating scent of cedarwood, instantly turned to ice. Noah watched in pure, paralyzed horror as the man holding him, the man who had just touched his face with such agonizing tenderness, morphed into a literal monster right before his eyes. Lorenzo didn't yell. He didn't throw anything. But the physical transformation was terrifying. The muscles in his broad back went completely rigid, his massive shoulders tensing into granite. The icy blue eyes that had looked at Noah with such profound devotion just a moment ago went entirely dead, devoid of any light, humanity, or mercy. Lorenzo slowly reached out and took the blood-stained black envelope from Matteo's trembling hand. He didn't even flinch at the sight of the dried blood coating the edges. His eyes scanned the jagged silver handwriting. "We know the little bird's name. We're coming to clip his wings." A low, dark, vibrating hum started in Lorenzo's chest, a sound so primal and dangerous it made the hairs on the back of Noah's neck stand up. It was the sound of a predator preparing to slaughter. "Who?" Lorenzo asked, his voice a lethal, barely audible whisper that echoed ominously off the marble floors. "The Corsican Syndicate, boss." Matteo swallowed hard, his eyes darting to the floor. "They crossed the eastern border. They slaughtered our dock crew in broad daylight. They left the letter pinned to the chest of our captain with a combat knife. They are demanding control of the Viridia port, or they say they will take the boy." Noah's breath hitched, a cold, suffocating wave of terror washing over him. The Corsicans. Even in the lower districts, working at the coffee shop, Noah had heard whispered, terrifying rumors of the Corsican Syndicate. They weren't just Mafia, they were butchers. And now they were hunting him. Lorenzo slowly crushed the heavy black envelope in his massive fist, his knuckles turning stark white. He turned to Matteo, his face a mask of absolute, unhinged fury. "Initiate Protocol Omega," Lorenzo commanded, his voice booming with the authority of a dark god. "Lock down the estate. I want every single guard armed with high-caliber weapons. Snipers on every roof. No one enters, no one leaves. Bring the inner circle to the war room. I want the head of the Corsican boss delivered to me in a box before sunrise." "Yes, boss." Matteo nodded sharply, immediately turning on his heel and barking orders into his radio as he sprinted down the hall. Suddenly, the entire mansion erupted into organized chaos. Heavy steel shutters slammed down over the massive floor-to-ceiling windows, blocking out the fading sunlight and plunging the estate into artificial light. Dozens of heavily armed men in tactical gear poured into the corridors, their heavy boots echoing on the marble. Noah stumbled backward, his back hitting the cold stone pillar of the foyer. He was hyperventilating, his hands clutching his chest. He was drowning in a world of blood and violence he didn't understand. Lorenzo turned back to him. The Mafia boss closed the distance in 2 large strides, completely ignoring the chaos erupting around them. He grabbed Noah's upper arms, his grip firm, almost bruising in its intensity. "Look at me," Lorenzo ordered sharply. Noah shook his head, tears spilling over his thick eyelashes. "They are going to kill me, Lorenzo. They know my name. They know where I am. Look at me." Lorenzo roared, the sheer volume and power of his voice shocking Noah into stillness. Noah's wide, terrified hazel eyes snapped up to meet Lorenzo's blazing blue ones. "No one is going to touch you," Lorenzo growled, his face inches from Noah's, his breath hot against the boy's trembling lips. "Do you hear me? God himself could not take you from this house tonight." I will drown this entire city in blood before I let a single Corsican rat lay a finger on you. Before Noah could process the terrifying weight of that blood vow, Lorenzo released his arms, only to scoop him up entirely. Noah gasped as his feet left the floor. Lorenzo carried him with effortless strength, marching past the frantic guards, deep into the heart of the mansion. They bypassed the grand staircase and walked into Lorenzo's private, biometric locked study. Lorenzo pressed his hand against a hidden panel behind a massive bookshelf. A heavy hydraulic hiss echoed through the room as the shelf slid away, revealing a thick, titanium steel door. Lorenzo typed a complex code into the keypad, and the heavy vault door swung open. "Lorenzo, what is this?" Noah asked, his voice trembling as Lorenzo carried him down a brightly lit, concrete stairwell. "The bunker," Lorenzo replied coldly, "built to withstand a nuclear blast or a full-scale siege. You are staying here until I return." At the bottom of the stairs, the bunker was surprisingly luxurious. It looked like a high-end apartment, complete with a massive bed, a fully stocked kitchen, and independent ventilation systems. But the lack of windows and the thick steel walls made it undeniably clear. It was a cage. A beautiful, impenetrable cage. Lorenzo set Noah down on his feet in the center of the room. He immediately turned to leave, his mind already calculating the logistics of a brutal mafia war. "Wait!" Noah cried out, his fear of being abandoned overriding his fear of the man. He lunged forward, his small, delicate hands grabbing the lapels of Lorenzo's expensive suit jacket. He held on desperately. "You can't just leave me down here. Please, Lorenzo, don't shut me in this box." Lorenzo froze. The feel of Noah's desperate grip on his chest was a physical blow to his iron control. He looked down at the boy, his jaw clenching so hard a muscle ticked furiously in his cheek. "I have to go to war, Noah," Lorenzo said, his voice a harsh, jagged rasp. He tried to gently pry Noah's hands off his suit, but the boy held on with surprising, stubborn strength. "Men are dying. My men. I have to slaughter the people who threatened you. You cannot be up there. Then let me stay in your room. Let me stay where I can hear your voice on the radio. Don't lock me in a vault." Noah pleaded, fresh tears trailing down his flushed cheeks. "You're acting like a machine. You're scaring me." The accusation hit Lorenzo like a physical bullet. He stopped trying to remove Noah's hands. His broad chest heaved as he stared down at the beautiful, terrified boy crying because of him. Lorenzo let out a ragged, defeated breath. The ruthless mafia boss, the untouchable king of Viridia, crumbled completely under the weight of those hazel eyes. With a sudden, violent motion, Lorenzo wrapped his massive arms around Noah's waist, pulling the boy flush against his hard body. Before Noah could even gasp in surprise, Lorenzo ducked his head and crushed his lips against Noah's. It wasn't a gentle kiss. It was desperate, bruising, and entirely possessive. It was a collision of raw terror and unhinged devotion. Lorenzo kissed him like a dying man taking his final breath of oxygen. His large, tattooed hand swept up to cup the back of Noah's neck, his fingers tangling in the soft brown hair, holding the boy firmly in place, refusing to let him pull away. Noah's eyes widened in absolute shock for a fraction of a second, his mind completely short-circuiting. The taste of Lorenzo, expensive mint, dark coffee, and raw, masculine heat flooded his senses. And then, Noah completely surrendered. The fear melted away, replaced by an intoxicating, burning heat that pooled in his stomach. Noah's hands slid from Lorenzo's lapels up to his broad, muscular shoulders, his fingers curling into the fabric as he kissed the mafia boss back with equal, reckless desperation. He opened his mouth with a soft whimper, allowing Lorenzo to deepen the kiss, giving the dangerous man everything he silently demanded. Lorenzo groaned, a deep, guttural sound that vibrated against Noah's lips. He pulled Noah impossibly closer, lifting him slightly onto his toes, wanting to consume him entirely, wanting to hide him under his skin where the world could never reach him. When they finally broke apart, both of them were panting heavily. The air in the steel bunker was thick and charged with a heavy, explosive electricity. Noah's lips were swollen and red, his eyes blown wide, his pupils dilated with shock and desire. Lorenzo rested his forehead against Noah's, his large hands still gripping the boy's waist securely. He was shaking. Lorenzo Thorne, the man who didn't flinch at gunshots, was trembling at the touch of an art student. "I am a monster little bird," Lorenzo whispered harshly, his breath fanning across Noah's wet lips. "I kill people. I destroy lives. The world up there is ugly and vicious, and I am the king of it. I lock you in this room because if I lose you, if they take you from me." Lorenzo choked on the words, the sheer terror of the thought momentarily paralyzing his vocal cords. "If I lose you, there will not be a city left standing tomorrow." Noah reached up, his small, trembling thumb gently tracing the sharp line of Lorenzo's jaw. He saw past the cold, dead eyes. He saw the terrified, fiercely protective man underneath. "Come back to me," Noah whispered fiercely, his hazel eyes burning with a sudden, uncharacteristic bravery. "You go do what you have to do to protect us. But you come back to this room, Lorenzo. That is a promise." Lorenzo stared at the boy, utterly mesmerized by the quiet strength radiating from him. Noah wasn't breaking. He was adapting to the darkness. "I swear it on my life," Lorenzo vowed, pressing one last, hard kiss to Noah's forehead. He slowly pulled away, the physical separation causing a literal ache in his chest. He turned and walked out of the bunker, the heavy titanium door swinging shut behind him. The massive hydraulic locks engaged with a loud, final clang, sealing Noah safely inside. Lorenzo stood alone in his study for exactly 3 seconds, composing himself. When he finally opened his eyes, the tender lover was entirely gone. Only the demon remained. He walked out of the study and down to the armory. Matteo and his top lieutenants were waiting, fully geared in tactical vests and carrying heavy assault rifles. Lorenzo bypassed the standard handguns. He walked over to a glass case, punched in a code, and pulled out a heavy, matte black military-grade shotgun. He racked it with a terrifyingly loud metallic shuck-shuck, the sound echoing through the armory like the tolling of a death bell. "The Corsicans wanted a war," Lorenzo growled, his icy blue eyes completely devoid of mercy, shining with a homicidal madness that terrified even his own men. "Let's go show them why the devil wears a thorn suit." Back down in the bunker, Noah sat on the edge of the massive bed, his fingers lightly touching his swollen lips. The silence of the steel room was oppressive. He knew what was happening above him. He knew Lorenzo was unleashing hell. For 2 agonizing hours, Noah paced the floor. He tried to sketch, but his hands shook too violently. He tried to drink water, but his throat was too tight. He was terrified for the man who had kidnapped him, claimed him, and kissed him with such devastating passion. Suddenly, the heavy silence of the bunker was shattered. It wasn't the hydraulic hiss of the door opening. It was a massive, concussive thud that shook the concrete floor beneath Noah's feet. Dust fell from the ceiling vents. Noah froze, his heart stopping completely in his chest. Another thud, louder this time, closer. It sounded like an explosion, coming from directly above the bunker. Then, the emergency red lights inside the safe room flickered and began spinning, bathing the concrete walls in a terrifying, bloody crimson glow. The automated security system's voice suddenly echoed through the room, cold and mechanical. "Warning. Perimeter breach detected in Sector 4. Main estate compromised. Warning." Noah backed up against the far wall, his hands flying to his mouth to muffle a scream. Lorenzo had promised no one could get in, but Lorenzo was miles away at the docks. And someone, or something, was blowing their way into the impenetrable Thorn estate. End of Part 6. Part 7, The Diversion. The heavy, suffocating silence of the bunker was entirely gone, replaced by the shrieking, mechanical wail of the security alarms. The red emergency strobe lights spun frantically, casting horrifying, bloody shadows across the cold concrete walls. Noah was pressed flat against the furthest corner of the room, his knees pulled tightly to his chest. Every time another concussive thud vibrated through the ceiling, a fresh shower of white plaster dust drifted down onto his trembling shoulders. Warning. Main perimeter breached. Hostile entities in the West Wing. Lockdown protocol failing. The robotic voice of the security system was the most terrifying sound Noah had ever heard. Lorenzo had sworn this place was impenetrable. He had promised that even God couldn't get through these walls. But whoever was up there was systematically tearing Lorenzo's fortress apart. Noah's hazel eyes darted frantically around the luxurious cage. He needed a weapon. He needed somewhere to hide. But there was nowhere to go. He scrambled off the floor, his breathing ragged and shallow, and ran to the heavy kitchen island. He pulled open drawers, his hands shaking so violently he could barely grip the handles. Finally, his fingers wrapped around the cold, heavy steel of a large chef's knife. It felt completely ridiculous in his hands. He was a barista who painted watercolors, not a soldier, but he held it tightly against his chest anyway, praying he wouldn't have to use it. 10 miles away, the Viridia shipping docks were a literal war zone, bathed in the orange glow of burning warehouses and the strobing blue lights of shattered floodlights. Lorenzo Thorn was not a man, he was a force of catastrophic destruction. His charcoal suit jacket was gone, his white dress shirt stained with soot and the blood of his enemies. He moved through the chaotic maze of shipping containers with the lethal, terrifying grace of a panther. His matte black shotgun roared, each deafening blast sending another Corsican Syndicate member crashing to the wet concrete. Matteo and the Thorn inner circle flanked him, executing their boss's wrath with flawless military precision. The Corsicans had thought they could launch a surprise attack, but they had vastly underestimated the sheer, unhinged fury of a Mafia king who felt his most precious treasure was threatened. Lorenzo kicked open the door of the main harbormaster's office, the heavy wood splintering instantly. Inside, the Corsican captain, a scarred, burly man, was frantically trying to reload an assault rifle. Lorenzo didn't even blink. In a fraction of a second, he closed the distance, slapping the rifle out of the captain's hands with the barrel of his shotgun before driving his heavy combat boot directly into the man's knee. A sickening crack echoed over the gunfire outside, and the captain screamed, collapsing to the floor. Lorenzo towered over him, his icy blue eyes completely soulless. He pressed the searing hot barrel of the shotgun directly against the captain's forehead. "You came to my city." Lorenzo's voice was a low, demonic growl that cut through the noise of the burning docks. "You threatened what belongs to me. Give me one reason why I shouldn't paint this office with your brains right now." The captain, despite the agonizing pain, started to laugh. It was a wet, gargling sound that sent an immediate, icy spike of dread straight into Lorenzo's heart. You thorn bastard." The captain spat blood onto Lorenzo's expensive boots. "You brought your whole army here. You brought your best men. You left your castle completely unguarded." Lorenzo froze entirely. The air in his lungs turned to shattered glass. "Did you really think," the Corsican wheezed, a grotesque smile spreading across his face, "we wanted this garbage port? This was just the bait, Thorn. Our main strike team, the heavy hitters, they're at your estate right now. They're cracking that vault. They're taking your pretty little boy." The world stopped spinning. The sound of the roaring fires and the distant gunfire faded into absolute nothingness. For the first time in his 32 years of life, Lorenzo Thorn felt pure, unadulterated terror. It was a physical agony that ripped through his chest, far worse than any bullet he had ever taken. Noah. His beautiful, innocent Noah. He had left him alone. Lorenzo didn't say a word. He didn't even pull the trigger. He simply turned on his heel, his eyes blown wide with a frantic, homicidal panic. "Matteo!" Lorenzo roared, his voice cracking with an emotion his men had never heard before. "To the cars. Now, forget the docks. Get me back to the estate. We have to get back to Noah." Matteo took one look at his boss's face and instantly understood the catastrophic reality. He shot the Corsican captain twice in the chest without breaking stride and sprinted after Lorenzo. The convoy of black SUVs tore away from the burning docks like missiles. Lorenzo was in the passenger seat of the lead car, his hands gripping the dashboard so hard the plastic was cracking under his fingers. "Faster," Lorenzo snarled at the driver, his chest heaving. "If you don't break the engine, I will break your neck. Drive." They were flying through the city streets at over 100 miles an hour, ignoring every law of physics. Lorenzo's mind was torturing him with horrifying images. He pictured Noah's terrified hazel eyes. He remembered the soft, desperate way Noah had kissed him just hours ago, begging him to come back. "I swear it on my life," Lorenzo had promised. If he lost Noah, he would put a bullet in his own head. There would be no world left to rule. Back at the Thorn estate, the red lights in the bunker were still spinning. Noah had backed himself into the furthest corner behind the heavy bed, the chef's knife trembling violently in his two-handed grip. The thuds from above had stopped. Instead, a new, far more terrifying sound began. It was a high-pitched, agonizing squeal of metal grinding against metal. It was coming from the massive titanium vault door. Someone had attached a thermal breaching torch to the hydraulic locks. Noah watched in absolute horror as the thick steel around the lock mechanism began to glow a violent, blinding orange. The smell of burning ozone and melting metal flooded the sterile air of the bunker. "Lorenzo!" Noah sobbed quietly, tears streaming down his face. Please come back." Crack. The first hydraulic lock snapped under the intense heat. Noah squeezed his eyes shut, his knuckles turning stark white around the handle of the knife. He was completely trapped. Crack. The second lock gave way. Then, a deafening explosion rocked the room as the remaining mechanisms were blown inward by a localized breaching charge. The heavy, impenetrable vault door, the door Lorenzo swore would keep him safe, groaned in protest before violently swinging open, crashing against the concrete wall with a sound like thunder. Thick, gray smoke immediately poured into the bunker, completely obscuring the entrance. Noah stopped breathing. He held the knife up, his heart hammering against his ribs like a trapped bird. Heavy, deliberate footsteps echoed on the stairs, descending into the bunker. Through the swirling gray smoke and the spinning red emergency lights, a massive silhouette stepped into the room. The figure was holding a heavy assault rifle, its barrel still smoking. Noah let out a terrified, broken gasp, stepping out from behind the bed, raising the kitchen knife with shaking hands, prepared to fight for his life against the Corsican assassins. The figure stepped fully through the smoke. Noah. The voice was ragged, breathless, and completely broken. The assault rifle clattered uselessly to the concrete floor. It wasn't a Corsican assassin. It was Lorenzo. He was covered in soot, sweat, and blood. His expensive clothes were ruined, his hair wild. He looked like he had literally run through the fires of hell. But his icy blue eyes were locked onto Noah with a desperate, agonizing intensity. Noah dropped the knife. It clanged loudly against the floor. Lorenzo. Noah didn't think. He didn't hesitate. He launched himself across the room, throwing his entire body at the Mafia boss. Lorenzo caught him midair, wrapping his massive, powerful arms around Noah's slender waist, crushing the boy to his chest with terrifying force. Lorenzo buried his face into Noah's neck, inhaling deeply, his broad shoulders shaking violently as the adrenaline crash finally hit him. "You're safe," Lorenzo gasped, his voice cracking, repeatedly pressing fierce, desperate kisses to the side of Noah's head, his neck, his jaw. "You're safe. I've got you. They didn't touch you." Noah clung to Lorenzo's broad shoulders, his tears soaking into the ruined fabric of the man's shirt. The door, it blew open. I blew it open," Lorenzo breathed out, pulling back just enough to frame Noah's face with his large, soot-stained hands. "The security system locked down. I couldn't override it fast enough. I couldn't wait another second to see if you were alive." Lorenzo looked deeply into Noah's tear-filled hazel eyes. The realization of how close he had come to losing his entire world fundamentally shattered the last remaining wall around the Mafia King's cold heart. Right there, amidst the smoke, the blaring alarms, and the ruins of his impenetrable fortress, Lorenzo Thorne dropped to his knees. Still holding Noah tightly by the waist, the most feared man in Viridia looked up at the young barista, completely surrendering his soul, his empire, and his life to him. "I love you," Lorenzo vowed, the words tearing out of his chest with raw, undeniable truth. "I will never leave your side again. You are my heart, Noah. You are my everything." End of Part 7. Part 8, The Heart of the Syndicate. For a terrifying, breathless eternity, the only sounds in the ruined bunker were the blaring of the emergency alarms and the ragged, heavy breathing of the two men. Lorenzo Thorne, the undisputed king of the Viridia underworld, a man who had built an empire on a foundation of cold marble and ruthless violence, was on his knees. The harsh, spinning red lights of the breached vault illuminated the soot, the blood, and the absolute, shattering vulnerability on his handsome face. He held onto Noah's waist, as if the 23-year-old barista was the only force of gravity keeping him tethered to the earth. "I love you. You are my heart, Noah. You are my everything." The words hung in the smoke-filled air, heavier than the steel door Lorenzo had just blown off its hinges. Noah stared down at the terrifying, magnificent man kneeling before him. His mind raced back to the rainy night in the coffee shop, the blood on Lorenzo's shirt, the thugs in the alleyway, the sniper fire, and the suffocating fear of the last 2 hours. Every terrifying moment had led exactly to this. To this shattered, beautiful confession. Noah didn't run. He didn't pull away. Instead, Noah slowly sank to his own knees on the cold concrete floor, bringing himself perfectly level with the Mafia boss. He reached out with both of his small, trembling hands and gently cupped Lorenzo's soot-stained face. Lorenzo's icy blue eyes fluttered shut at the contact, a profound, shuddering sigh escaping his broad chest as he leaned entirely into Noah's warm palms. "You foolish, beautiful man," Noah whispered, his voice thick with unshed tears. With his thumbs, he tenderly wiped away a streak of ash from Lorenzo's sharp cheekbone. "You blew up your own house, because you couldn't wait 5 minutes for the system to reset?" Lorenzo opened his eyes, the dark, obsessive devotion burning brighter than ever. "I would burn the entire world to ash if it meant getting to you 1 second faster, little bird. I told you. I cannot breathe when you are not safe." Noah let out a wet, breathless laugh, a tear finally escaping and rolling down his flushed cheek. He looked deep into Lorenzo's eyes, past the darkness, past the violence, and saw the man who had retrieved his grandmother's photos, the man who had bought an entire hospital just to keep her safe. "Then breathe, Lorenzo," Noah whispered fiercely, leaning in until their foreheads rested against each other. "I am right here. I am safe. And I love you too." Lorenzo's entire body went rigid. His breath hitched violently in his throat. He stared at Noah, his pupils dilating heavily in the dim light, searching the boy's hazel eyes for any sign of hesitation or fear. He found absolutely none, only pure, unwavering adoration. With a deep, guttural groan, Lorenzo surged forward. He wrapped his massive arms around Noah, pulling the boy flush against his chest, and captured his lips in a kiss that was 1,000 times more desperate, more passionate, and more profound than the one they had shared hours ago. It was a kiss of absolute surrender. Noah parted his lips with a soft gasp, tangling his fingers deep into Lorenzo's messy, dark hair, pulling the larger man closer. He tasted the smoke, the danger, and the overwhelming love pouring from the Mafia boss. In the ruins of the steel bunker, surrounded by the chaos of a Mafia war, Noah finally accepted his permanent place in the dark, intoxicating world of the Thorn Syndicate. "Boss!" The frantic, echoing shout tore through the stairwell. Lorenzo broke the kiss, though he kept his arms tightly wrapped around Noah, completely shielding the boy's body with his own as he turned his head toward the ruined doorway. The murderous, lethal aura of the Syndicate boss instantly snapped back into place. Matteo emerged through the clearing smoke, his assault rifle lowered, his chest heaving. He stopped dead in his tracks when he saw his boss, the most feared man on the eastern seaboard, kneeling on the floor, holding a young boy as if he were holding a fragile deity. Matteo respectfully averted his eyes, staring at the concrete wall. "Boss, the perimeter is secure. The lockdown held." Lorenzo's jaw tightened. "The strike team annihilated at the outer gates, sir," Matteo reported, his voice steady despite the adrenaline. "They never even made it onto the front lawn. The perimeter breach warning was just a tripped sensor on the eastern wall. The house was never actually compromised." Matteo paused, glancing at the violently destroyed titanium vault door. "Sir, did you blow the vault yourself?" Lorenzo didn't flinch. He didn't show an ounce of embarrassment for his catastrophic overreaction. He simply looked down at Noah, who was tucked safely against his chest, listening to his heavy, steady heartbeat. "I did," Lorenzo stated coldly, his voice echoing with absolute authority. "Because waiting was not an option. Matteo, I want the estate cleaned. I want the security doubled. And then, I want you to gather the captains." Lorenzo slowly stood up, effortlessly pulling Noah up with him. He kept one heavy, protective arm securely wrapped around Noah's slender waist, tucking the boy securely to his side. "The Corsicans wanted a war," Lorenzo growled, his icy eyes turning entirely devoid of mercy. "Tonight, we end their bloodline, burn their safe houses, sink their ships. I want their syndicate completely wiped from the history books before the sun rises. No one threatens my family and lives to see tomorrow." Matteo bowed his head deeply. "It will be done, boss." As Matteo sprinted back up the stairs to execute the massacre, Lorenzo turned his full attention back to Noah. The lethal, cold boss melted away, instantly replaced by the gentle, devoted lover. "Come, little bird," Lorenzo murmured, kissing the top of Noah's hair. "Let's get you out of this dust. You are sleeping in my bed tonight, and every night after." Noah rested his head against Lorenzo's broad shoulder, his fingers curling into the ruined fabric of the charcoal suit. He wasn't scared of the orders Lorenzo had just given. He understood now. This was the only way their world could exist. Lorenzo was the monster in the shadows, so that Noah could remain in the light. 6 months later, the city of Viridia had changed. The Thorn Syndicate was no longer just a powerful organization. It was the absolute, uncontested ruling force. The Corsican Syndicate was nothing but a ghost story, a terrifying reminder of what happened when you crossed Lorenzo Thorn. The streets were quieter. The lower districts were surprisingly safer, funded by mysterious, anonymous donations that built new community centers and schools. The Thorn estate had been completely repaired and upgraded. But the biggest change wasn't the reinforced steel or the new guards. The biggest change was the light that had finally pierced through the heavy, oppressive darkness of the mansion. It was a beautiful Sunday afternoon. Golden sunlight spilled across the meticulously manicured gardens, catching the spray of the massive stone fountain. Noah was standing in the center of the garden, wearing an oversized, paint-splattered white button-down shirt that clearly belonged to Lorenzo. His sleeves were rolled up, exposing his delicate wrists, and a streak of blue paint was smudged across his cheek. He was intensely focused on a large canvas resting on an easel, humming a soft, happy melody to himself. He didn't have to work 2 jobs anymore. He didn't have to worry about rent, or thugs in alleyways, or his grandmother's health. Evelyn was thriving in her luxury penthouse suite, boasting to the nurses every day about her wonderful, handsome grandson and his incredibly generous business partner. Noah was finally free to simply exist, to create, to be happy. From the shadows of the rose archway, Lorenzo stood silently, watching his entire world. He was dressed in a sleek, custom-tailored black suit, looking every bit the dangerous Mafia king. He had just finished a brutal 2-hour meeting with his underbosses, solidifying a multi-million-dollar weapon trade. But as he stepped into the garden and laid his eyes on Noah, all the violence, all the stress, and all the darkness of his empire completely evaporated. Lorenzo slowly walked up behind the boy. His footsteps were completely silent on the grass. He wrapped his massive, heavily tattooed arms around Noah's slender waist from behind, pulling Noah flush against his chest. He buried his face in the crook of Noah's neck, inhaling deeply. Noah still smelled like vanilla, but now he also smelled of expensive oil paints and the subtle, lingering scent of Lorenzo's cedarwood cologne. Noah smiled softly, not startled at all. He leaned his head back against Lorenzo's broad shoulder, resting his paintbrush on the easel. "How was your meeting?" Noah asked softly, turning his head slightly to press a kiss to Lorenzo's sharp jawline. "Boring. Irrelevant," Lorenzo murmured, his deep voice vibrating against Noah's back. "I spent the entire time thinking about how I would rather be here, watching you paint." Noah laughed, a bright, beautiful sound that made Lorenzo's heart perform a heavy, dangerous flip in his chest. "You are the boss of a massive syndicate, Lorenzo. You can't just skip meetings to watch me mix colors." "I can do whatever I please, little bird," Lorenzo countered smoothly, his hands sliding up to rest over Noah's heart. He could feel the steady, calm rhythm beating beneath his palms. "I rule this city, but you rule me." Lorenzo gently turned Noah around in his arms. He looked down at the boy who had completely dismantled his cold, empty life and filled it with warmth. He reached into his inner suit pocket and pulled out a small, sleek black velvet box. Noah's breath hitched, his hazel eyes widening in shock as Lorenzo slowly opened it. Inside, resting on the dark velvet, was not just a ring, but a heavy, custom-made platinum band, deeply engraved with a delicate pattern of thorned roses. It was beautiful, dangerous, and entirely perfect. "I don't need a piece of paper or a priest to tell me what you are to me," Lorenzo said, his voice dropping to a low, raw whisper, his icy blue eyes burning with an eternity of devotion. "You are my soul. You are the light in my pitch-black world. I vow to protect you, to cherish you, and to destroy anything that ever tries to bring you harm, until the day I take my last breath." Lorenzo took the platinum ring from the box and held it between his fingers. "Wear this, Noah. Let the entire world know exactly who you belong to, and exactly who belongs to you." Tears blurred Noah's vision, but a radiant, breathtaking smile broke across his face. He didn't hesitate for a single second. He held out his left hand, his fingers trembling slightly with overwhelming joy. Lorenzo slowly, reverently slid the heavy platinum band onto Noah's ring finger. It was a perfect fit. The cold metal quickly warmed against Noah's skin. Noah threw his arms around Lorenzo's thick neck, pulling the giant of a man down into a deep, passionate, completely uninhibited kiss. Lorenzo groaned, his arms wrapping tightly around Noah, lifting him slightly off the grass, completely consuming him. They stood there in the sunlit garden, surrounded by high stone walls and armed guards, perfectly safe in their own beautiful, dangerous reality. I had dismantled empires and silenced my worst enemies without a single ounce of regret. But finding this beautiful, innocent boy in a rainy coffee shop was the greatest victory of my life. He was the light. I was the shadow. And together, we were untouchable. End of part 8. Wow, what an absolutely incredible journey. If your heart was pounding as fast as mine during that intense bunker scene, then you know exactly how powerful Lorenzo and Noah's story truly is. Welcome to the ending analysis, everyone. Today, we are breaking down the breathtaking dynamic between the ruthless king of Viridia and the innocent boy who completely stole his heart. Let's dive into why this specific story hits us right in the feels. Let's start with our little bird, Noah. At first glance, it is easy to think of him as just a fragile, helpless boy caught in a terrifying world. But Noah's true strength isn't physical, it is his unwavering empathy. When he first meets the most dangerous man in the city bleeding in his cozy cafe, he doesn't see a monster. He sees someone who needs help. That pure, unfiltered compassion is the exact weapon that brings a ruthless mafia king to his knees. Noah proves that you do not need a gun to be powerful. Sometimes, the softest hearts are the only ones strong enough to tame the dark. And then we have Lorenzo Thorn. Lorenzo is the ultimate embodiment of control. He dictates who lives, who dies, and how the entire underworld breathes. But the beautiful irony of his character is that the moment he claims Noah, he completely loses that control. He becomes a willing slave to his own devotion. The most symbolic and powerful moment in the entire story is the bunker breach. Lorenzo built a titanium vault that could survive a war, but he literally blew it to pieces himself because he couldn't survive 5 minutes of not knowing if Noah was safe. It shows that his true fortress was never the estate, it was Noah. The core theme of this story is the violent collision of two completely different worlds. Lorenzo systematically destroys his own dark, blood-soaked reality just to build a safe, sunlit garden where Noah's light can finally bloom. The platinum ring at the end, deeply engraved with thorned roses, is the perfect symbol for their love. Noah is the beautiful, delicate rose, and Lorenzo is the lethal, unbreakable thorns protecting him from the rest of the world. But now, I want to hear from you. What was your absolute favorite moment in Lorenzo and Noah's story? Was it the badass alleyway rescue, the sweet hospital visit, or that desperate confession in the ruined bunker? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. I read every single one. If you love this Mafia romance and want to see more thrilling, high-stakes stories just like this, make sure to smash that subscribe button, leave a massive like, and turn on notifications. Until next time, stay safe, and thanks for watching.